Hello, I'm your. It's just a leg, don't worry about it. Wouldn't you like to go back in time and fix some mistakes that you made, perhaps? Well, here's the thing. Classically, rewinding time was what I was always thinking about in regards to um, time travel. I have revised my theories. Of course, this means that you have to create an artificial time tunnel. So, how do you best do that? My original thoughts were that you have to make a kind of tunnel that would be going backward in time while the rest of regular space is going forward in time. Regardless of how you make this, my original assumption was that you would be constantly bumping into yourself or something. It was it was ridiculous. I admit that now. All you have to do is take, well, okay, a very simplified time tunnel construction, if the bending of space-time is at all possible. All you have to do is you bend it enough that a section of the flow of time is going backwards. And then you just travel that as if you're going forward through space and time, but you just end up in the backward. So depending on when you leave, that's the time in the past you'll end up. Is there any problem with this? No, technically. Um, well, in the standard model that I originally thought of rewinding time, yeah, don't do that. Rewinding time, you're going to bump into yourself. Going forward in time, you're basically a statue and you might as well just be in stasis. That's fine. But if you're going to travel either forward or backward in time faster than regular time flows, then you can make a hyperchannel and you can make a reverse time directed forward traverse tunnel. So really what does it look like? What it looks like is, let's say you took a section of time, managed to managed to change how it moves through moves space around it, and generally the theory goes that if you can make the space in the tunnel to be able to be oriented so that time that progresses forward is actually going in time that progresses forward in the tunnel is actually leading towards a area in normal space time that is in the past. I mean, that's all it is. So there are some interesting physics things that might happen, like if you make this in outer space, what happens when an asteroid hits one of these tunnels, or a photon of light, for example. For all we know, this could be a black hole. Essentially, the idea of reverse time is that if you go backward in time with the spatial dimension, anything that is normally trying to go forward in time, it's like when it hits that boundary, it's going to hit and probably just ricochet off. Because what happens is it hits, and then the backwards flow of time starts to hit. And so when it gets there, it's like if it's, let's say it's moving tangential to the tunnel. Okay, so you have a tunnel here and you're moving along it. So what happens then is that it's like two conveyor belts, one's going forward and the other one's going backward. That's not a great way to think of how time would work. And again, you don't need a tunnel per se, you just need like an area of time. A black hole would be suffice. The moment you go in, right? Like I say, when you transition from the outside to the inside of the time tunnel, again, the spatial dimensions of it are irrelevant. It could be a tunnel, it could be a black hole. Like some kind of sphere of affected inverse time. Um, yeah, the usual thing that happens is that unless there's a normal way that you warp space-time so that such that the backwards, the flowing back into the backwards time momentum um, is like a smooth transition, like you were moving forward through space and time, but then because of its twisting, the more you move through it, the transition is normal. It goes backward in time. You exit wherever you want, whenever you want. So one thing that has to happen for this to happen is that that area of space-time has to exist throughout all of the time that you want to traverse. So could it be that you make an artificial bubble of personal space-time? And my usual suggestion is that's not going to work. Again, you have the reverse. You have this um, the best way to describe a tunnel that is possibly stable is like a Mobius strip, where on one side you're going forward through time, and on the other side you're just going backwards through time. But even though you move through it in the same forward direction, no matter which part of it you end up on, you're still going forward, the regular forward through time, but it's bent so much that you're actually on the other, once you get to the other side, you're actually going backward through time for the duration of that strip. This is a model that can work for real life space-time travel if the if the idea of bending space-time is even true, and I don't believe it is. That's the problem with it, is that I don't even believe that bending of space-time could even be true. But if it could, you could make a Mobius strip so like in all four-dimensional view, this Mobius strip would exist. So why not? Somewhat. Some people might say, why not a Klein bottle? Don't, 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 don't. Just don't. Stop. You're silly. You don't need it. You don't need a Klein bottle. First of all, I mean, listen, the kind of warping that you need to do in order to warp space-time to make a tunnel that works is all you have to do is have a flow that circles in on it. It's basically a straw. Or first think of a donut shape or a toroid and how that flows. Elongate it so you have a straw and you have a time tunnel where the outside time is flowing normally forward. The inside time is flowing normally backward. Does that make any sense? Like the morphology works, right? The topology works for those of you who like shapes and stuff. The topology of a time straw is essentially a toroid, just elongated, and then you end up with this long tube of it flows backward while everything else is going forward on the outside. Continuous surface. So, first of all, how do you make it flow inward on itself? And then how do you make it extend into the past deeper? Again, I don't believe you can even warp space-time. So, I'm not the one to ask. But if I were to suspect something, I would say you have to make some kind of energy field, and it would have to... Again, you still need... The reason why I'm stuck on you need a tunnel instead of just some bubble is because the reverse traveling through time, space, yes, that's the correct way to say it instead of space-time. The reverse traveling through time, space has like the area of the backwards flow travel, time travel tube has to be independent of normal forwards flowing. So the best way to do that is having like a hallway that like, yeah, the again, the problem with having a hallway or any kind of like, if you think of a hallway or a constructed structure, how do you construct it so that it actually is able to go backwards in time continuously? Now, in regards to going around like a planet, that planet only existed for a certain amount of time, so until it starts like going back in time so far that whatever star exploded and then made that planet the way that it was, um, yeah, you can use that for like a certain amount of time. And then you'd have to have another time jump space that regards a different thing. But again, according to the normal time displacement or time dilation effects, which I don't believe in because they aren't real, but according to the normal time dilation effects, it's like nanoseconds per week or something. It's a fraction of an instant of time for an entire week for a localized gravity field to be like, okay, this is not working so well. And that's just because you have inaccurate clocks and you're lazy as fuck. I don't care to insult everyone who works at NASA. I don't care. Lazy as fuck. NASA. All of NASA. In regards to one thing, it's a very avoidable thing. It's a very trivial thing. You just beam the time up to it with a satellite-based interlink with a regular on-the-ground atomic clock whose motion through space is very predictable and deliberate, unaffected, unchanging, otherwise known as stationary reference frame. If you really want to say those kinds of words, I don't. They don't apply. They aren't reality, but go ahead and say a stationary reference frame. Whatever. Because it's not a accelerating because it's not going faster. It's not decelerating, so it's pretty much stationary in regards to that function. Or that is to say, it is a stable, accelerated frame. True stationary doesn't exist. You'd have to stop moving in regards to all space. Let's just not, because that's never what happens. It's like an immovable rod. You don't understand. The immovable rod is such a silly. It's. Let's not get into that. The point is that the moment you make an immovable rod happen, you turn it on, the entire Earth's rotation speed and everything else is going to have it just whip past really fast, because in regards to the fabric of space-time and flat space and everything else that is moving in it, the rod will now become a stationary thing. It just might go straight through the planet instantly. Don't turn an immovable rod on in real science fiction settings. It's not a good idea. In magic, it's not immovable in the fact of it's not physically moving. It's a geosynchronous orbit or some bullshit. It's relative to the elevator. It's a Thor's hammer. It's something like that. That's how we work it, but true immovable rod is a god dang anchor in space-time that anything moving will simply just be crushed by it. Tangent over. Anyway, I mean, we already experienced trying to move an airship and you crushed someone's chest with an immovable rod. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. When you think of the whole planet as moving instead of just the it's all magic timely wimey. Who cares? Let's go back to physics. So when you're working with space-time folding, if you can do it at all, or a bubble of my brain is still stuck on it has to be a time tunnel. It has to be a warping of space-time such that regular flow of forward space-time is instead twisted so much that it's directed to go backward through time. And again, anything trying to. Okay, so there is a natural wormhole like opening where you can go into this thing, and that's fine. There is a side tangential that you don't want to touch because the transition of moving. Well, here's it's a good question because how traumatic, how horrible is it to touch one of these things as you try to push your way in from the side? Well, the answer to that is that I tried talking about it earlier in the video. Brain kind of fried a little bit talking about conveyors and stuff. But it's like well, really isn't that much different than having two conveyor belts that are moving side to side of each other, and you're just hopping onto the other one so that instead of moving backwards, you're now going forwards. This is only good if you can do that instantaneously for the entire mass that's transitioning the plane. However, the boundary. However, if you can't transition entirely, that is to say, quantum tunnel your way in, um, I mean, yes, obviously, you would like to, the most optimal scenario for if you have to go into a time tunnel from the side is just make another warping of space-time that makes an opening leading into the time tunnel such that there is no transition between forward and backward space-time. It's just you're moving forward, but the section that you move into is also going in that opposite direction. Basically, just make another mouth somewhere else. Again, don't hit this. I'm pretty sure you don't want to hit this thing from the side. Why am I stuck on that? I feel like I'm stuck on it. I can't. The problem is conveyor belts and stuff doesn't really put it into perspective because the progressing of stuff forward Here's the thinking of a as a conveyor belt is odd. The idea is that let's say you're blowing up a balloon, right? On one side of the tunnel, on the inside of the tunnel, you blow up the balloon and it inflates. That's on the outside, normal forward space time. On the inside, it's the opposite. So that balloon's going to deflate instead. Depending on the amount of warp, the amount of time, the amount of speed of time progressing backward, for example, a second per second, if you were to go a second per second backwards, you might end up with like you travel into it, but like all of your processes and everything will have slightly time shifted and affected you so that you are actually you might you won't remember the transition for sure because it's like bouncing off a time mirror. You end up or going through the looking glass. Going through the looking glass is different where it's more like you're entering again another mouth of the tunnel. We're not looking at going we've established that that works, it's fine. You can do that. But going from just on the side of the thing. So, okay. So let's say that the time tunnel, let's say you want to get somewhere and you want to go backwards in time, and the time in that backwards tunnel, it's like it would take you a day to end up in a day in the past. Well, that kind of a thing, reverse time area of a second to second, you're not going to actually feel that much of a difference. Again, technically, you're not going backwards in time. How do I? It's hurting my head a little bit. Technically, you're not going backwards in time. Because again, it's just a forward. It's just that. Would you spaghettify? Like, because as if you go in increments where part of you exists in regular time for a second, part of you exists in backwards time for a second, then that part that is backwards traversing is moving without you. Yeah, that's spaghettification. Yeah, no, that stuff's just gonna move without you. So what you definitely need to make a mouth. Don't Don't go in through the sides. Not advised. Holy crap. It is spaghettification. Because that part that's going backward in time will have gone in and is starting to go backward in time while you're still trying to transition in. So again, unless you transition in like again, it depends on a couple of things. One, the speed of time progression in the time warp tunnel. The warp tunnel can go, let's say, a very slow pace, so that it could take you years to go back a few seconds, or it could take you seconds to go back a few decades. Please understand, anything hitting the side of this thing is going to spaghettify, unless it's like a photon or something. It's a great defense against asteroids. If you want to destroy asteroids, a time manipulated area of space would spaghettify any asteroid that it comes into. Again, this is not dissimilar from the analogy of a black hole, where black hole is essentially spaghettification because of all the gravity and stuff. But this is happening. The spaghettification from the time tunnel is because of the disconnect from regular time to backwards progressing time. And with each bit of matter that makes that transition, like the faster you go in, the more intact you'll be. So if you go fast enough, if a black hole is going backward in time, you could go fast enough to go into it. You just won't get out because the out is in the past. And who knows how fast that crap is going. If bending space-time is real, and if you could bend space-time enough, then if a black hole were to do something like that, it is more likely that it would be a time ripper hole, which is not a regular black hole, but ironically has similar effects to what a black hole is described to do because of the gravitational, just gravitational effects. So, yeah, if you were to go fast enough or send a signal fast enough, it could be received in the past. If the time tunnel thing, something, something. However, if you make a twisting of space-time such that you can make a mouth into the time tunnel, then you can go in and not spaghettify because you'll just be moving. It it should be fine. The problem also comes to like what happens to the atmosphere around, and that's an interesting question. Like a lot of these um warping space-time things have it so that the area is like shrouded with some cloud of vortex that goes around the thing, and it's like this storm inside the thing. And that might make a lot of sense. You might end up with faster than light collisions on the barrier between regular time and, like, in that area, the event horizon of this time tunnel. Um, why do I like time tunnel instead of a sphere? Well, fourth dimensionally, they're not dissimilar. The problem with spheres, there is no normal twisting of time leading inward. So it's just that there is this boundary of that pocket is going backward in time. So how could you make something like that? Pretend that something is exploding and then that explosion leads backward in time. With a black hole, that means an empty space started from somewhere, and then as you go back in time, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. For a regular black, if a regular black hole is a time thing, that's what you would have to change the definition to in order for it to make sense for what we see of what it do. Is there any difference between a time tunnel and a time window? What? Consider like a Stargate or a portal from Portal. Like you go through it and you end up in the back time where it wanted you to be. Reality is that that portal has been time shifted so much that the outside of it has to be where it is, and then it ends up. When you go through it, it feels normal. But what you're actually doing is traversing time so fast backward. I mean, you could direct it in forward or backward. And also, ironically, could be the same technology that makes you be able to. Obviously, if you can go forward and backward rapidly, there's nothing to say that you can't traverse space with a time window. The thing that happens with time windows is the idea that dimensionality is can be razor thin, and the local space-time aperture science. Um, I find it difficult to make such a thing work. Can't fully, like all good science theory, you can just say, well, propose it's possible to make a time window. Okay, in order to make a time window, you'd have to have maybe all of space-time that is in that area to be specific enough that just that tiny window, tiny and referring to like a door or something, sized window, something. You pass in through it, you end up wherever it was aimed at. It's different than the bending of space-time. It is possible to make those types of things. It is a more preferred time travel method because it is a separated time instance that is, again, it's essentially a tunnel. Like, the thing that bugs me so much about time windows is once you go in, you are like, I can't help but think of the acceleration, right? Because you would have to accelerate, you would think you would have to accelerate this, but there's a way that you could also, if you could also distort it so that you're accelerating the space time, but inside the aperture, it's the area that you're going through, space time is regulated so that it's just like walking through normal space. It's hard to wrap your head around because in order to go through, like when it comes to traversing regular space and you think of, are you going to progress forward fast or extra fast through space? The acceleration and the g-forces and everything involved with that is obvious. Whereas would the is there any way to avoid spaghettification and actually make a mouth? The mouth would be the portal in the first place, but again, a mouth into a time tunnel and the time tunnel and everything else, it just and a time doorway. Like, clearly, it shouldn't just... Like, what if it's stable enough that you could just travel forward or backwards through the doorway? Because it just becomes a portal, then you could just travel backwards and forward through it. Why think that there would have to be any acceleration whatsoever? I don't know why I'm so bent on there must be there must acceleration. It's the same thing that I got stuck on the last time I talked about all of this, is that it feels like there should be still acceleration involved. That there's some kind of change of trajectory of where you are in relation to where you're headed. But that's why most people, when they make Time Machine, that they warp the area of space, and that warping of space is an instantaneous initiation of a separate time energy state around their ship, like in the Time Machine, so that you're unaffected by the acceleration change, and your traverse through time and space is like a transmatter. It's a separate... But again, you're still going through space. It's hard to think of time travel without going through space. So it becomes the idea, like, which method are you using? And can it be done in general in any way whatsoever? And how? And is there any way to be stable? Is there any way to not have issues? I don't... Time... This is why I prefer tunnels. Tunnels are just sort of, but it's not the calculations. Calculations don't mean anything to me right now. A lot of calculations don't matter as much to me as just analyzing the physicality of things, which to me is more analog. Calculations are whatever, but just thinking of object go through tunnel. Tunnel is moving backward in time. How does the object traverse into said tunnel or time distorted space without some kind of problem? And it's a whole thing. So then is that, like, now for the sake of messages, right? Even like a message would be like, one of those backwards playing videos, but once it arrives, it's playing forward. And also you made the video in the future. Translate that into people and stuff, and it's so weird. If you could do it so that you don't have the effect of backwards flowing time affecting the traveler, such that they themselves reverse their aging process or something like that. Because that would, I mean, if it's for a few seconds, it's not going to be an issue for them. But so if it's for a few seconds for them going backwards, like, okay, you lose a few seconds while you are in the tunnel. And then once you're out of it, obviously you're going to continue to, you're going to revert back to now you're moving forward through time and everything. So, how do you achieve this? That's the thing. And even in theoretical models, it breaks down to, can you even achieve this? In theory. And a lot of people would just hand wave and say, of course, in theory, you can achieve anything. And then it's reality that becomes hard to make it work or whatever. I personally am fond of the twisting time thing. And I'm still stuck on inertia. Like, there's no reason to say that no matter how fast you're moving through outside space-time, your own space-time can be normalized so that you're still progressing. A day is a day, right? A second per second. That you're not getting older, or you're not maybe decelerated, so you're getting older slower as you go backward or forward through the time thing, or like how does your local thing work? But I can't separate the fact that if you go backwards in time, even if your inner of the tube is if you're going forward in time, how do you even enter that normally? This is why you need some kind of twist in time. The opening would be stable, the outside would be unstable. And again, it's the physical phenomenon for the outs. It's always about what I always get stuck on what happens to everything for the sake of the outside observer for someone naturally going forward in time. It's similar to the Time Machine video, that old movie, where you make the bubble, everything else is going and playing backward and forward like it's a movie, and you're just dragging it backward and forward on the dial so that stuff just progresses in different directions and you're stable. That is technically the ideal situation. It's just not feasible. And even with the bending of space-time, if it could happen, which it doesn't, but if it could happen, then it becomes achieve something like that, and then you have um, something that works. Was the TV show called Out of Time? I forget. There was this eyeball time machine. It had a couple of rings that going around it and whatever else. That momentum and stuff is not nearly enough to create like gravity distortions and stuff. The amount of speeds that you're making are so ludicrously small. Like, you're not going to progress the machine to move fast and then warp space-time around you with gravitational effects by moving rings at that at the speed that the TV show is doing. You'd have to move the rings like 1,000 times faster or something. They are not doing that. It's a show, so they can't, but also, um, yeah, you can't. So there's that. That eye ship was cool, though. If only I remembered what the show was called. It was neat, though. And it's weird because eventually, in the end of it, you end up becoming the thing that wants to keep things together, and therefore you become the thing that you thought that maybe you were fighting in the first place, because their first idea was to do the thing that you wanted to do, but then, like, you don't recognize that that's what you're supposed to be doing. It's a weird, it's a mind fuck, that show. Anyway, I mean, the best time manipulative stuff is like tachyons, then you have the bending of space-time, then you have like some weird energy that goes around your ship, and then that is able to make it so that time for the inside of the area where your ship is independent of all other time, and somehow you're able to dial in how fast you're going in, and then obviously when you turn it off, that's when you exit. So we'll have tracks under us and we'll go safely across the ravine. But Yeah, this was just an idea about can you make time tunnels and would they be the most stable thing? I'm still stuck on that, and I don't think about time windows or doors or whatever. Although a time door is the minimum requirement for the thing, I just feel like the and the other thing is, what if you want to make one of these things, how do you actually progress it so that it goes backward in time where you want it to go or whatever? And I'm still stuck on inertia. So it's a loop. There is no, like, there's nothing that you can do so that when you're going through time backward, I can't help but see inertia. Even going forward in time, if you made a thing like unless so maybe you need a combination of things. You need like the force field to regulate your own time space, but you still need to be able to go into the time tunnel. But then how do you actually build the time tunnel and or how do you actually facilitate the transition into the accelerated time frame that is accelerated into the reverse of what is normal time space. It's a thing. A video game describing this, like the best, I don't know how many, like it's usually just you just flash end up where you wanted to be or something like that. And or I don't know. Then you have Star Trek with its red matter. The red matter reminds me of the show Alias. It was a levitating ball of red stuff, which essentially is analogous to what you would have to do with antimatter. You have to levitate it, and a ball of it is the best way to confine it. I mean, you could make a tube, but a ball works, right? I don't know. It's all a thing. Time. There's of course the idea that if you take an area of space, time, and simply distort its functions so that everything else around you is moving in the reverse of what it normally is, but your local area is fine, then yeah, I guess you won't have issues. But it's about how does your traversal through time affect the local area. Like, you won't have issues, but what about the rest of space? Still matters. It's the whole thing. Whatever. I don't know. Can't quite get it. One of the one of the one of the fundamental problems also, again, is not can you traverse through space-time backwards and whatever else, is that how can you actually, but there are some forms of time travel where you can only travel to, like in a space-time, like how do you progress it to go backwards? Like you would think that the moment you open the portal to go backwards, if you're pushing a time area to go back, technically you can traverse backwards as far as you want. Again, the question becomes how rapidly you are inverting the time so that when you, wherever you end up, it only took you, like the distance from when you were to when you end up is, could be, again, decades or millennia or billions of years, and for you it only took a second. Hmm, don't quite have it. Yeah, I don't know. Not enough, but like there's something about if you're going, I mean, there's always the chance that it's a weird thing to think about what would happen to you if your time inside the tube wasn't like, what if it is you age faster or you age in reverse for the time that you go into the distortion? Like, like is there a way to even like I the problem is I keep getting stuck. I keep thinking that there's something about the transition from normal time into this time tunnel, and because you start moving relative to every other thing that is going forward in time, you start moving in this tunnel, and then this tunnel ends up going backward, and as you go backward in time, how are you not spaghettified? It's different than the previous assessment where I thought you would just run into yourself all the time and cause nuclear explosions. This is more of you are the transition of different time states is that, again, it's a change in acceleration. What if you didn't transition into the portal transitions across you? Not sponsored by chips. So again, the best method might be that making your own independent area of time There's always some measure of, as long as you're not as long as the area of space in the ship doesn't accelerate and it's just the outside that changes. Uh, Whatever.